There you go.
Got it. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up. We really appreciate it. And I hope everybody's doing well. This is a busy time of the year, so we're happy that you were able to take the time and join us today. We have an expert joining us today, Maggie Churchill, and Maggie is our WIDA expert at NJTESOL-NJBE, and she is a fountain of knowledge, and she is going to share with us the WIDA Language Standards 2020. She's going to give us a breakdown. See, I have it. I made them buy it for me. And I've also put into the chat, there's a link for Maggie's presentation. She's going to show it on the screen, so you don't have to follow along, but you're welcome to use it and print it out and use it for all the good things that Maggie is going to share with us today. So without any further ado, welcome, Maggie, and we really appreciate you coming to join us today.
Awesome. My pleasure, Mary. It's actually nice to be back to Burlington chapter, Mansfield, no, you're Burlington County, right?
Yeah.
You're Burlington County chapter. I think I remember I like Zoom presented with you folks, like maybe it was even before COVID or during COVID. I'm not even
It
sure.
was before COVID.
Okay. So
Yep.
nice to be back. And I know we have other folks who maybe you're from up north or another location, because you can join on Zoom, and that's totally great too. And you know, you're actually, maybe you've even seen and heard some of the things in today's presentation before, and that's totally great too, because if you were like me when I first started looking at the framework, it took me 6 years to figure this out and to learn it. So repetition is the key. You know, you only are given like what, 6 hours, right? And I've studied it for 6 years. So I'm, you know, really thrilled to be back, going back and visiting chapters this year, which is great. That's how I got started in Bergen chapter, just doing like the, you know, diving in with folks and doing the kind of dirty work, so to speak, and really trying to figure it out together, which is what I've always loved about the chapter experience. So I'm really grateful. Those chapters is how I got my start in NJTESOL-NJBE. Also, like Mary said, the link is there to the slide deck, and you are welcome to share that. A lot of the pieces that are in there are just pieces or snapshots from the framework. It's already published information. It's in the public domain. You are welcome to share that with folks back in district. And that's often too kind of like the way things are going these days, where they sort of send one person and that person has to, like, you know, turnkey. This is not something you should be turnkeying though. Along with this chapter presentation, just to remind everyone, you do have access to a lot of other resources about the standards framework on your WIDA portal. You know, when you log in, you have your WIDA login and your password on your WIDA portal on that desktop where you have, it says teach, assess, grow. Pardon me, under the teach, that's where the standards lie. And there's lots of webinars. There's all the documents that support this are there. And WIDA is actually constantly updating this, just so you know. They're always going to be, really every couple of months, they release some new items. So there are some new items already out there. And they're always releasing new resources and materials that support the implementation. And then, you know, a little shout out already to the organization. So of course, at the NJTESOL-NJBE Spring Conference, we are going to have, of course, WIDA is always in the house. So WIDA will be there presenting, diving in deeper to the standards framework with some special sessions. I'll be presenting as well on it. So will Dr. Lynn Schaefer-Wilner. She is the lead author of the standards framework. So we're fortunate. We've worked with her for several years now. And so she always comes back to our conference. So there's a lot of support from the organization. And please reach out to me in case you have like a specific question. So what I'm going to be doing today is probably more presenting, and it's okay if it's new to you or if it's new material. Again, the focus this year is really to build capacity of our knowledge and our working understanding about the 2020 standards framework. It was just released by the state in August. So that gives you time. First, you're required to learn about it. So your district is responsible for making sure that you are trained in delivering your standards. That's these standards. So they can't just ask you to write curriculum. You must be trained in this first. and then curriculum writing would follow. So for example, in my district, we just started the training. I started doing it yesterday for the folks in my district and surrounding districts. And then they're going to kind of continue that on their own. And then next year we write our curriculum, and that would actually be implemented in the following year. So year 3, that actually gives us 2 years to build our own capacity around this. So in case you are feeling pressured about revising your curriculum, you need to put the brakes on, because you must be trained in how to teach these standards yourself, right? So again, we have to get our advocacy hats on, and we know we are our own strongest advocate, and remind districts they are responsible for training us in how to implement our own standards, which are brand newly approved this year. Okay, so just that first, I want everybody to know. Okay, so don't hit the panic button yet. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I am going to get started with our presentation. And I'm going to kind of minimize some things. So I won't necessarily be able to see you. And let me see if I can get like the big version of this. Okay. And you also have a QR code there as well. So if you want to quick, like grab it on your phone, if for some reason, you want that and you want to be on Zoom on your computer or however that works for you. I did develop this presentation for chapters with your former chapter liaison, Hannah Prashker. She's since retired from the executive board of NJTESOL-NJBE, but she was instrumental in helping me develop a lot of the content that we delivered for over 2 years in our PLC around looking and learning at the WIDA Standards Framework. So this is really a compilation of the work that we did over 2 years. So I have co-presented this with Hannah, and some of the work I'm doing individually with chapters and some of the work she's doing individually with chapters. So it works out well for us this year. Okay, and I don't have actually I want to drop in the chat box. I don't have my email address on there, but I will drop that in at some point when I can find the chat box. Where is it? Maybe I'll even do, oh, here we go, chat box. Okay, so I'm going to drop in my email. In the chat box. And so again, if you have specific questions or follow-up questions, and a lot of the questions that I've been getting are following, like, do we have to rewrite our curriculum now? Whoa, put the brakes on, as I said, because your first responsibility to yourselves and to your district and your students is that you have to build your capacity first. You have to be trained in teaching your standards. That's mandated in the bilingual code, and your district is responsible for making sure that that happens. So we are going to happily remind them of that over the next year, because you have to have the opportunity to learn it first before you're asked to rewrite curriculum. And in our district, that's a process that takes time. So that buys me another 2 years, but it also buys the rest of the folks some time too. So that's nice. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Pardon me. Maybe you've seen again some of these slides. So I'm going to be pretty direct in saying a lot of it comes directly from the framework, and this is really the sort of, I guess, 12,000, foot view here of the framework in terms of its big ideas that are incorporated throughout the framework. And so it really is about these 4 core ideas. It's centered on equity. I'll talk about it, specific examples of how, by giving students opportunity and access to both content and language instruction, and making sure that what needs to be understood is that these are standards for every teacher. So these standards are not just for ESL teachers. And we have a tendency to hear that when folks will say, oh, those are your standards. I'm like, no, those are our standards, because I've actually been working directly with science teachers this year. And when you get to the language for science, those are not things that I teach. Those are the science standards. I actually built a unit with a geometry teacher in high school. When you get to the language for math in 9 to 12 in this framework, those are not my standards. I don't teach that in my classroom. Those are for the math teacher. So that's what's the unknown piece. And that's a big part of making sure. And that's why collaboration is also a big idea here, because mainstream teachers also need to get that message, and they also need to be trained, because these are standards for multilingual learners in every classroom, not just the ESL classroom. Okay. So integration of content language I kind of talked about, and that's where we see that in each of the separate standards, right? So it's social instructional language, language for language arts. Those standards haven't changed, right? Language for science, language for math, language for social studies. The collaboration is now a very big idea that's at this larger, higher level, which really gives it an elevated status. What's important to know is that it's a core idea in the approved standards framework. And that means that the responsibility for collaboration also falls on district administration. They need to ensure that we have time and access for and with each other. So we cannot be the teacher teaching in isolation anymore. We need to have access and time to our mainstream teachers as collaborators, to all stakeholders as collaborators, whether administrators who need to be trained, or guidance counselors who need to be trained. So that's all the stakeholders, anyone who works and supports multilingual learners. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the functional approach to language development. And this is really where we focus on that language piece. It's very specific in how it delineates the ways that we should be teaching language. And so I'll give you some examples of what that looks like as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, the 5 standards are still the same. They have not changed. But the big difference is what we see here with standard 1. So standard 1 is now threaded throughout all of the other standards. And you actually will see this when you look through the framework. Standard 1 has things in it that you won't find in the other standards, but that you actually need. So I'm going to give you some examples of that. So some things I actually found today where students actually have to locate definitions and understand terms, and they have to define things. That's standard 1. Where students have to collaborate with each other and have a class discussion about a topic. That's standard 1. So how students collaborate with peers, with partners, how they participate in a class, how they speak to each other and speak about topics. That's standard 1. The ways that we teach kids to advocate for themselves, the spaces that we make for them sharing their opinions and sharing their cultural knowledge and their depths of knowledge and that background, that's standard 1. So what I love about standard 1 is it really makes that space and allows for that can-do philosophy of that, what we accept and what we know our students are superheroes in, right? That they have that knowledge, those funds of knowledge in their culture and their background and all their ways of knowing. Standard 1 makes a space for that. And that is infused throughout all. But some of the things you might actually be looking for that maybe you're doing in class, you won't find any standards. Take a look back in standard 1, you'll find them there. So it's worth exploring. Okay, so this slide actually shows the 4 parts of the actual framework. So the actual framework has 4 parts in it, right? These are the pieces of the framework. You have the standard statements that we just talked about. Those are the English language development standards. And what's important about it, again, is that we advocate to our district and our supervisors and administrators that we need training in these standards. As I was talking with Kathy right before we started, people also need reminding that these are our actual standards that we teach. It's these standards and not some other set of standards. These are the English language development standards. And so there's this nesting image that we have. So it's kind of a larger piece, a broader piece. It goes to a little more kind of descriptive piece. And they kind of are nested inside of each other, which is also mirrored in the flow of lesson plans. You'll see some examples of that in what I'm going to show you today. So within each standard, you have, as you look through the framework, you have the key language uses. And there are 4 key language uses. I'll talk about those in a little bit. You might have some familiarity with those already. What you do need to know is actually they've changed. So the 4 key language uses are narrate, inform, explain, and argue. And they've changed a little bit from the original key language uses. So if you see something that has other ones in it, like recount and discuss, those are the old ones, and those are not in the 2020 edition. Okay. Somebody pointed out to me that one of the testing interfaces, if your district uses Linkit, is actually using the old key language uses. And they showed it to me and I said, oh, that's wrong, because those aren't the current key language uses that are reflected in the 2020 standards. Okay, and then you actually see on this slide an example of language expectations. And so one of the biggest changes and biggest differences in the 2020 framework is that we now have codes. We have standard codes. We have arrived. We've got numbers now. We've got numbers, folks. So just like every other content area has standards, LARI 5.1A, right? Guess what? We've got numbers. So we actually have a system that we are going to need to learn and we're going to need to use. And it is this coded system that starts first with the standard English language development. It tells you which standard number, language arts, social studies, math, right? It tells you the grade level cluster. It tells you the key language use, and it tells you the communicative mode, whether it's expressive or interpretive. And then underneath it, what you see here are language expectations. And what's great about these is that they read just like lesson objectives. So you should be using them like lesson objectives. They look and sound just like lesson objectives. And that's really where they would fall in a lesson plan. Okay. And then another aspect within that, not really within it, but like kind of, I guess almost at the end, are the proficiency level descriptors, which really are the piece that's used to help us assess and see how students have grown. So I'll be talking a little bit about those, not too much about those. What's actually nice about this is in the framework, they're quite lengthy, but as I mentioned, they're always submitting new information. And WIDA has just come up with a very short one-pager that's a sample resource on the proficiency level descriptors. And it's actually a blank rubric that you can use to kind of show a student's performance. And it's much more useful than what you'll see in the framework, because when you go to this, after each grade level cluster at the end, there's these proficiency level descriptors that go on and on and on for pages. And it's just, coming from me, it's too much. So I love this one pager. It's new. It's called the sample resource. We just released it. But it's a nice complement. And it kind of makes things a little more palatable. Okay, so let's start.
Maggie, can I interrupt you? And where is it on the WIDA website? That page?
So it is on the WIDA website, but I'm trying to remember where I saw it. It's like, I think it's in their implementation guide, which is also new. So in the implementation guide, there's some pieces that are released along with that. I only have it as a hard copy because what I did was I actually even took a screenshot. I didn't even get it into this presentation. But I took a screenshot and I just used a hard copy of it from a PDF.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm asking you to do on your end a little bit of downloading right now. Okay, so if you do not have the big gigantic book version like Mary does, and that's okay. Although I do have the big book version, but if you don't feel like carrying around 390 pages, I guess Mary likes that. I know she's building up her muscles, maybe. If you need a digital version of it, I'm going to ask you to do this right now anyway. So if you teach K-8, or if you're the only teacher, God bless you, K-12 in your district, you're going to need the full framework. If you don't, like me, and you only teach 6 to 8, then you want to go to the grade level cluster edition, because that's only 6 to 8, or it's only, you can go there and you can get just 2 to 3, or you can go there and you can get just kinder. So this is nice because if you're only the kinder teacher, you don't need the whole hot mess. Oh, sorry. I mean, the entire standards framework, all 390 pages. However, I do have to say that there are some things in the 390 pages that you will need. And so that's why I want you to do both. So I have the book that Mary has. You can ask your district to purchase it. They can use their Title III funds to do that. Our district bought it for all of us. I keep mine at home. I'm not lugging that back and forth. So if I need it, it's at home. I also have the grade cluster edition. I've downloaded on my computer, and I've also downloaded it and I've given it to my mainstream teachers, just what they need, not the whole thing. You all will need the standard satchel. I'm not going to get really into that tonight. However, it is a quick lookup to find the standards codes that you need. if we have some time at the end, I can kind of quick show how to do this. But I'm already using it because it helps me quick find the numbers that I need. And then what's nice, it has like a working side, and then it has a pin board, just like Pinterest. You pin it to the working side, and then you can copy it and paste it into your lesson plan or drop it. Here's the question though. Your districts eventually are going to need to get this somehow, because you're going to need to drop it into your interface that your district uses for lesson plan submission. Because you do not want to look these up in the 390 pages. That's just a waste of everyone's time. The Standard Satchel makes it much easier, but it does take some learning, okay? And I'm new to it as well. And then finally, this is the new one, as I mentioned, Mary, this is the implementation guide. The implementation guide is a little bit more of WIDA's kind of answer to how to implement it, like through units and things like that. However, it's more of a theoretical approach, so it's kind of like a big look at unit design and unit planning. My approach is a little different because I'm starting a lot smaller and I'm starting with just individual lessons. So if you're doing curriculum rewrites and design, that's the kind of big approach, top down. Take a look at this, but you will find some of those good pieces. Like I mentioned, the 1-page resource for proficiency level descriptors is in there. So take a minute, download these links, press the star on your computer to bookmark them so that you always have them. You also have these links in the presentation, and share this with everybody and anybody you know. Okay, so again, you're welcome to share these slides. They were created for this purpose. I'm just going to move on from there and assume that folks are already doing that behind the scenes. Okay. Okay, so a little bit about key language usage. So remember, we talked about the framework, this kind of nesting image where we have the standards, and then you have key language uses. So the key language uses are what WIDA calls as genre families, which are really the purposes for which we use language. And those are narrate, inform, explain, and argue. And the reason why they use these key language uses is because it comes out of research that was done in Australia. A lot of it was done with Darawianka and Jones, and previous to that was Martin and Rose. And they found once they've done it was a longitudinal study on school-based tasks for children. And what they found is that nearly everything that we ask kids to do in school, it falls into one of these genre categories. We're either asking students to tell us a story or write a story, or we're asking them to research and report on information, right? Or we're asking them to explain how things work or tell why something happens. Or we're asking them to state a claim, give evidence and reason, or justify a choice or an answer. Nearly everything we ask kids to do is one of these 4 genre families or key language uses. And key language uses are in every content area. They're in every class. However, they're more prevalent in some and less prevalent in others. So of course, you're going to find narration in a language arts class, right? You're going to find it in a social studies class. You might not find too much of it in a science class, right? You might not find too much of it in a math class, although you will find it maybe in a word story, right? So it might be shorter or more situational, right? So as you go through the framework, you're going to see these charts that tell you where these key language uses are more prevalent and less prevalent. That's also going to help you with unit planning, because you don't need to cover all of these key language uses in every content area. You actually won't see them in the framework because it's just not that prevalent. So we're not going to shove narrate down, down their throats. If we're in a science class, it probably isn't going to come up. So don't worry about it, right? If it's not there, it hasn't really been articulated. Okay. So genres, as I mentioned, these are the 4 key language uses to kind of give you some context, right? I want to just talk briefly about each one, and to give us a sense of what we're really thinking and talking about when we teach this to kids, when we teach this in our classrooms, when we write lessons around this, and how we can actually start to use it in our own classrooms. And so I have these 4 examples for each one: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. I'm going to go through them and kind of talk about what the language expectations, the functions and the features that we see in each one is as it relates to grade levels and how we can actually help students to prepare to express these, because ultimately we see these kinds of tasks on the access test. So we see these on their high stakes testing, which all multilingual learners need to take. That access test in particular is going to change drastically in 2 years when it is fully aligned to the standards framework. So those 2 years I mentioned that we have for that capacity building for ourselves, we also have to get ready for the new access that's coming. So WIDA already has this in its development stages. We know it's coming. We know it's going to change. The expectation for the new rollout is 2026. Okay. So language expectations, as I mentioned, we had key language uses, and then we have language expectations, and we're going down that nesting image. Language expectations are those objectives, these read-like objectives, right? So it helps us plan for instruction. It helps us focus intentionally on what we are teaching the students and how we can help structure both the language and the content in a language by grade level, and really hone in on what the expectations are for that grade level. So grade level really has something to do with it here. WIDA actually gives us a sort of template to use here for how you can state it, right? So that's what you see here in the green, which is sort of a way of writing goals. And I like using these in lesson plans because it really does help you align to the framework, make it very intentional, and really helps keep your focus. Again, I mentioned before that one of the biggest obvious differences is that we now have this nomenclature. We now have numbers. We now have standards codes that we will have to start using that satchel. It's going to help us bring those codes into our units and lesson plans. It also needs to be available to all content teachers because these are their standards as well. Remember that the standards goes with the child in any room where a multilingual learner is. These are not just the ESL standards. These are standards for every teacher. So every teacher will need access to that. They're going to need some training as well. I know that's a big ask, and that's really the intent here. And like I said, as I've been working with it this year, I'm really seeing that very clearly. These are not the things, when I get into those content sections, these are not things that I teach in my classroom. That is what the content teacher teaches in their classroom. Okay. I know I'm kind of going fast because I know in the essence of time. So I'm wondering, like, Mary, if you can keep an eye on the chat box in case there's like one or two like real specific questions that you want to throw out there. I know it's a lot of information all at once, and I know we're kind of still getting our mind around this and are getting our feet wet, and it's hard because I have to acknowledge it. You know, we went from having basically one page where all the standards were written to 390 pages overnight. So that's a big ask. It's a lot to learn. It's written like this, kind of complicated, not simplistic in any way, sense, or form. And I'm grateful that I've had 6 years of learning from the best, so that I could, you know, help bring it back to our state, because it really is, it's going to be very impactful, and we need to build our capacity first around this. So please do not, you know, feel free to ask a question. You know, as they say, the only silly question not asked, silly question is a question not asked. So I'm here to support. I'm learning it myself. I you know, full disclosure, the one area I'm the weakest in are proficiency level descriptors. I'm still learning them myself. So I, you know, just want you to know that I'm here along with you learning it as well. And things are kind of always changing and being revealed about it. Okay. Okay. So we already know about the 4 domains of language. We are already familiar with listening, reading, speaking, writing. These are the 4 areas in which our students are assessed on the access test. We already know about that. We already use these, you know, the 4 domains. They're so familiar to us. What I like about this graphic here is it actually helps us understand, again, the purpose of this mode. And if I could add a line to this diagram, I would draw a line right down the center on a diagonal right here, because it would help us understand that Listening and reading are interpretive modes of communication. Add to that also viewing. So whether we're viewing images, talking about pictures, or we're viewing a video, or we're reviewing a presentation, those three serve as input, right? Our students receive information, they interpret information that they receive. And this is often what we do in the beginning of lessons. We provide some kind of input. We know this is true on the access test. Students have to listen first. They go through listening and then reading. We have to assess the interpretive mode first, and it shows us where they're at, right? We know this from access. We already know that that's true as educators, right? And now when we teach and when we provide that input to students, we need to focus on how students are making meaning of that input. And we can do that by deconstructing text. I'm going to show you an example of that together today. And WIDA is very intentional about the use of this, so much so that they provide an annotation chart in the standards framework to help with this. So deconstruction is a key way that we can help our students make meaning of text as they read, rather than waiting to the end and asking them questions where they say, Miss, I don't get it, right? How many times have you had that happen where you ask the first question, they're like, I don't know, I don't get it, right? By the time you get to the end, if that's what you're hearing, you know you're too late, right? You know we've missed something here. If students don't have a chance to make meaning as they read, they won't be able to answer those comprehension questions at the end. So this is a different method of teaching reading that's specific to multilingual learners. It's one way to actually highlight or make intentional ways to make meaning while reading. It's not the only way, it's just one way, okay? So I'll show that some of that to you today. And then the other mode that the writing and speaking are grouped into is the expressive mode. So once students have received information, they've received input, they've interpreted it, now they're going to express, just like they do on the access test. They need to represent their thinking. They need to prepare a spoken response. They have to write an explanation. They have to write an argument. They have to give an oral argument. And we need to do that together through co-construction. That's how students are going to learn the specific requirements of each genre, is if we co-construct those texts together. Okay, and I'll show you again, talk a little bit about some of those examples. Okay, so again, just kind of a wrap up of what I talked about of the parts of the framework. And that's what you see here in this nice funnel image. The funnel image basically shows you all the parts of the framework nested in an order, and it's the order of lesson progression. So if you were writing a lesson using the standards framework, you would follow this funnel where you always, you list your standards first. I do. That's what I do. I list the standards that I'm teaching first. I list my ELD standards, my NJSLS standards. I might have my bilingual standards in there, my Spanish language development standards, or other bilingual world language standards in there. They're going to get listed first. And then from that, you choose your key language use. Or what do I need students to do? Are they explaining something? Is this informational? Are they doing a report? Are they classifying something? Are they giving an oral presentation? Are they writing an argument essay? What are they doing? That's going to help you define your key language use. And then once you choose the KLU or key language use, that will actually give you, the framework will give you what the expectations are. They spell it out for you, right in the book, right in the standard satchel. And underneath that, they list the functions of the language and the features you need to teach that are specific to that KLU at that grade level. So it's a nice visual to help us see the flow. This is real, and I follow the same visual. I use that, I include that in my lessons. So every 20 pages or so in the framework, you will see this chart. Remember that I said that the first two modes of communication that students learn are listening and reading. We know that because we know that you learn your second language the same way that you learned your first language. You learned how to listen first in your native language, and you learned how to read next in your native language, right? So we already know this. Every 20 so pages in every grade level cluster, there appears this annotation chart that is meant to assist students with deconstructing text, with interpreting text that they have to read, so they can actually make meaning of the text and how the words function in order to make meaning while they're reading. And I'm going to show you an example of this. What I want to point out is that this actual chart is in every grade from kindergarten to 12th grade. Okay, I just saw some people's eyes go wide, like, wait, what? So please keep in mind, little disclaimer here. They should have put a little disclaimer on this, but they didn't. Do not use this chart in kindergarten unless you want the children to go home with like high anxiety. No, please take it easy, right? They have the same chart in every grade level just to show you this is how you could start, right? This could be a way of text annotation and basically all the features. However, start small is going to be my advice. I made my own little cheat sheet for it in the side because I don't even like how that looked. So when I do this and I work with teachers on this, I always remind them that all nouns, according to WIDA, all nouns are red, all verbs are green. Anything that modifies, so it either could be a preposition, an adverb, or an adjective, because it modifies a noun, modifies a verb, modifies a noun phrase within a sentence. Its function is to modify, is blue. Evaluative language is italicized. Cohesion is circled. Clauses are underlined and sentences are highlighted. I like this chart. It's a little easier to see. It's more visual. However, if I were teaching kinder, I would actually hide it and I would only start with the colors. One thing I will say that is true, these colors are always the same. Nouns are always red, verbs are always green, and modifiers are always blue. Please don't change the colors. You're going to confuse the heck out of kids. What's more important is that we actually use this as a tool and bring it back to schools. I love the idea of bringing it back to grade level teams and say, hey, in kinder, can we all make a poster and can we all do text annotation with all nouns are red, all verbs are green, all modifiers are blue? What are the modifiers in kindergarten? Adjectives. It's in the state curriculum. It's in the state language arts curriculum. Kindergartners have to learn adjectives. Those are your modifiers. Don't worry about prepositions with them yet. It's not there. Adjectives are, right? So start small and start with what's in their curriculum. I love the idea of everybody being on the same page and have just that same poster in every room. And for kinder, it would just be this. This would be your poster that says, you know, text annotation or text awareness chart, whatever you want to call it. But start with what's grade level appropriate. I would even start with just the colors in a newcomers class in high school. Why? They've never done this before, right? You want success the first time you do it. So start with what you're ready, okay? So I hope that kind of helps make sense of this when you see it. Don't panic, but start small. Just don't change these because that key is the key that we're going to use eventually in everything. But we want to make it a little easier to work with. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so here is some deconstruction. This is what it would look like. We are teaching the interpretive mode. We need to teach kids how to make meaning of text as they're reading. And so what we can do is start with a short piece of text. You can start with it already color-coded like this on the smartboard. I have the key right here. Everybody knows, no secret. All nouns are red, all verbs are green, anything that modifies is blue. And I had cohesion that's circled. Why? It's in the text. It was there. I didn't pick it. I didn't write this. They did. It's here. I'm going to name it. So when we deconstruct, right, we deconstruct text using that annotation chart, and we're going to highlight the features of language that we see in this KLU, which is inform. This is informational text for what? I think first grade. So notice, right, we're going to notice with the student how the language functions to help them understand the text. You can highlight it or color code it together, right? You can either use a highlighter in that color red or make it red, but stick to those colors, right? So what I love about this is when you read it and you deconstruct it in a chart, it really makes it clear to students how words function in the text to make meaning. So frogs live all over the world, except Antarctica. Remember, everything that's red is a noun. You can even talk about where these come in the sentence. Why? Because English has a predictable sentence structure. Nouns often come in the beginning of the sentence, possibly at the end. They can be also in the middle, but you often start a sentence with a noun at this grade level. Frogs usually like lakes and rivers and ponds. but some frogs live in trees, and there are others that live in the desert. So we help students notice that the green words are the verbs, right? Which tell us what the doer does, right? So nouns are doers. They do something in the sentence, right? That's really how nouns function. They do or perform actions, right? So kids aren't learning just that a frog is a noun, but they're actually learning what it does. When we color code and ask questions and help kids understand and make meaning of this text, and then have the opportunity to deconstruct it or kind of take it apart, I'm going to show you what some of those charts look like. They really have a chance to see directly how words function to make meaning. And I have some charts. I think we have them in slides in the end that are, it's a way for you to actually practice this, because we won't really have time here in this session, but you can practice this. This is a kindergarten example. And notice that your colors are red and green. So of course we have lots of nouns and verbs, but we also have cohesion, right? We have cohesion because we have pronouns, and pronouns create cohesion because they link to an antecedent. They refer back to the subject of this sentence. However, pronouns we know are confusing. I think they're very confusing in English, because as you read this text where it says, I get my backpack, look at the second sentence. It says, Bruno finds my crayons. And that's tricky because my does not refer back to Bruno. It refers back to I. And we know this is true about pronouns, is that the antecedent does not come directly before, but it could even come in a sentence before. Pronouns are tricky. And we see that repeated. Mom packs my lunch. So my is not mom, my is I. Right? So there's a lot to unpack and understand here. And it's really a worthwhile test that helps kids understand the text before they get to the comprehension questions, because we know the comprehension questions are coming. Here's an example of a deconstruction chart from a graduate student I've worked with, and it's at the high school level. She actually used a text that talked about how kids want access to TikTok, particularly in high school, because it helps provide an avenue for them to talk about mental health issues. And so they're trying to validate its use, whereas many states are banning it and some countries are banning it. They felt strongly that they want to protect access to TikTok so that teens have access to mental health support. And what I love about this deconstruction chart is it's also modified. So the deconstruction chart is something that you create from a short piece of text, like you have here. And it answers questions, typically 5W plus H. Who, what, where, how, when. It doesn't have to be all of them. It doesn't even have to be this many columns. If you were starting this out for the first time, you could start with just 3 columns. 5 might be a little ambitious. What I also like about it is that the first sentence might be done, or you can see that this chart is partially completed. You could even take it a step further and color code it so that kids really see explicitly, like you could color code this and you could color code the columns so that kids directly see where this goes. I love all those modifications the first time that you do it so that it's obvious to them and they're successful at seeing how these words function, not just as nouns, but this is what we are talking about. We're talking about this person who wants access to mental health. And what's nice about it is it also helps give you that gist of here's what the text is getting at. And I can even use these responses to ask my own comprehension questions. So what happened to this student? Can anyone tell me by looking at the chart? Well, I've got some answers right here, right? What happened to this student? Oh, he got hurt. He got hurt. He did, right? Well, what's that like when you get hurt? Can anyone tell me how that's described? Oh, yeah, that is painful, isn't it? You definitely have a hard time after that, right? When you get hurt physically, it also affects your mental health. We know this is true. So I love this as an interactive way of making meaning with kids together. It is not a solo activity. Everything we do around teaching and learning with our students, with multilingual learners, 75% of the time or more is with support, right? We are co-deconstructing and we will eventually be co-constructing. So it's a great example, but it's an ambitious one. Again, that's just one example. It could be a simpler version like the frogs. Then you could start small, okay? So it's just a way of showing you one way to activate that interpretive mode to help students make meaning of text. And just in the essence of time, I'm going to swing on over to the output, which is that expressive mode. And this is ways that we can think about teaching students and how we teach students to learn discourse structure and features of text, because we see that in the 2020 Standards Framework, and help them explicitly plan a response either for spoken language or co-construction for written language. And that's what they're asked to do on the access test. Okay, so here's an example of an explanation, right? With tsunamis, right? So we might see this in a science class, and we know that in a science class, students have to, if it's an explanation, they have to state what it is. They have to talk about a phenomenon. They often have to give me the steps. We sort of know that's what's coming. We can anticipate what's coming. We can actually talk about that with kids. And we see a lot of visual information that also helps provide information. And we need to basically, understand that, take that apart. But many times they themselves will then be asked to explain this, right? Can you tell me how a tsunami happens once they read about it, once they interpret images about it? So I've done this in my class where I create digital anchor charts to help teach the structure of how or why something happens. And I use the language functions in the framework, and I actually list them here to help make explicit what students have to do in each of their steps. We know that there's a lot of written explanation on the access test. How do you give an explanation? Well, that's what's next to each number. The first step, and this is for grades 6 to 8, I'm a middle school teacher. The first step was to orient the audience to the topic. If you look in the framework, you'll see it says that. Okay, so then I asked my students, so what are you going to explain today? Oh, we're talking about the water cycle. Okay, so let's try that. All water moves how? Right? They're going to tell me in a cycle. It actually moves in a cycle. You don't see the cycle, but it basically is moving that way. We look at images, we look at pictures. So once they orient me to the topic, they have to state the phenomenon. Oh, okay. Well, how does that happen? What does the science tell us? How does the water get from the ground to the sky? Do you know how? Oh, yeah, there's this thing called evaporation. What do you mean this thing? Can you explain that? Sure. Well, the sun heats up first, the sun. Oh, that's what happens first, right? Yeah, first the sun heats up the water in lakes and rivers. So they start to go through this process where they're taking me through the steps. What happens next? After that, what's that last step, right? And since it's a cycle, they usually talk about how it repeats in some way or the process continues, right? But this anchor chart helps make explicit to kids what the steps are, how you give an explanation. It's not something that's intuitive. It's not something maybe that we've ever taught before. I've used these anchor charts. I find it really helpful. I want to invite you to do the same. Feel free to use this. However, know that it's 6th to 8th grade. If you are under that, you're going to have fewer steps. Yeah, but you'll still have most of these where you have to orient us to the topic, tell me the phenomenon, get through the steps, right? It might be a shorter explanation, but it's still going to be, the bulk of it is going to be that. When you pull all this together, I'm thinking back to that funnel idea. What's nice is that there is this image in the framework that actually shows us the kind of order in our lesson plan, these steps of what to do. How do I implement this in a lesson plan, right? I showed you this in the funnel before. Those are those actual steps. But what's even better is the green side right here. The green side shows you how to deal with the language. I want to see if I have that on the next. Oh, I don't have it on the next. So the green side actually talks about what content are you teaching? What do students have to learn? How are students using language in the unit, right? What's the KLU we want to focus on? What language expectations are going to be those objectives we talked about? And how are you going to teach function through an anchor chart? And the language features, those little pieces of grammar and language that kids actually have to use. How are you going to teach that within your lesson? Are you doing a mini lesson? Are you going to help focus on that? It needs to be intentional. it needs to be purposeful and it needs to be selected. So that's kind of like a way of thinking about how to pull it all together. So they kind of have some nice visuals that help us see that. Something that we have provided for you is what we call a unit sketch. So it's just a quick one pager as a way to invite you to take a unit that you already have, something you already teach. You don't need to reinvent the wheel here. And try to map it out on this sketch by naming the standards that you teach from that standard satchel. Are you teaching Inform, right? That's your KLU, right? You're going to do ELD standards. That's where the numbers would go, right? Those numbers I showed you. What's the content? Are you doing the water cycle? Are you doing animal reports? Are you doing country reports? Are you doing an argumentative essay? Are they arguing about, we should get rid of the electoral college? Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. That, or it could be an argument about, there should not be cell phones in school. Another argument, right? So is that your content? KLU would then be argument or inform, explain, narrate. And those expectations, once you look in the framework for your grade level cluster and your KLU, you're going to see those expectations are already there for you. You can actually copy and paste them right in. The expectations are the highlighted sections within your standard. And the functions, you're going to see it. I'm sorry, the expectations are in the top box. That's a color box. And the functions are the highlighted ones. And the features are the little bullets on the page. So we kind of go from big to small, like that funnel, right? So the idea is you also have this in your slide deck as a resource to use to kind of start. And I invite you to start. And if I could give any advice at all, I would actually recommend that you start with an informational unit, because Inform is something that we're pretty familiar with. And I like, it's very easy to kind of lay out and inform something with information and see if you can actually start to map that out and sort of try it on your own. Here's just a black and white version. Sometimes in a unit, you have more than one KLU. I did this for an Olympic unit, so I had a kind of double version of it. So you have these two, it's the same thing really, unit sketches as a way, as a tool to use. And these are some examples that we had participants complete for over the 2 years that we did our professional learning community, or PLC. These are some examples of completed ones. So you can see in grade 6 to 8 what water cycle might look like if you did a unit sketch based on the framework. That's a nice one. The satchel, there's a little demo here on how to use it. It's a video for that digital interface that I talked about as a way to kind of quick grab those standards. And again, we're not using them officially this year because you have to learn how to use your standards. You have to be trained in it. And you also have to rewrite curriculum first. So it's just a way, another resource for you to start to learn, become familiar with, because within 2 years' time, we will be implementing this and we'll see that change in the access as well. And then of course, little shout out for our conference. If you want to learn more about the WIDA 2020 Standards Framework, come now, run now to the NJTESOL-NJBE website, and you can sign up now. Registration is open May 29, 30, 31. We're at the same place, the Hyatt. We also have a video library access as well. I will be there. Dr. Lynn Schaefer-Wilner will be there. We actually, Ken Bond, I believe, is going to be there. He's also now with WIDA. Lots of WIDA in the house. And I want to thank everybody for just joining me today and starting to build your own capacity as well. I want to applaud you for taking that time and again, just, trying it and learning it. The more you listen to it, the better it gets, trust me. And I've had to repeat the same learning myself over and over and over again. And that's really the best way to kind of start to feel comfortable and reach out and try something. So please keep in touch with us. Let us know how it's going. We'd love to I'd love to see some examples, share what we had for you today. And we hope to see everybody at the conference. I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll just take a look at the chat box, Mary, while we're,
Yeah, there actually isn't. You gave us so much information, Maggie. I was like at the screen.
I know.
Yeah, there's so much, but I love the tools that you put in there for us.
If I could just interrupt, please don't leave yet, because I think we're going to put a link in the chat box for your PD form. Is that right, Kathy? Good. Hang around so you can
Yeah.
get the link in the chat box for your PD hours. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't leave without it. Because we want that. And thank you, Alyssa. But again, too, Rona, feel free to, like, spread it out, share it out there. There's more to come, but also to advocate, because you need time to learn this. So advocate for time as well, because this is a big learn. Right, Rona? Rona's like, yeah, I've seen her.
Yeah,
It's
it's a lot. I'm
I
still
know.
proud.
I know. I'm feeling you, really, truly. And I really do understand what it's like, because I'm so grateful I had access to some really amazing WIDA researchers that no one has had access to. So I'm so grateful I've learned from them. And I'm so grateful for what the organization has done for me, that I want to bring it back and I want to bring it forward, because we're in the trenches every day with kids. And we're the only, a lot of chapters in New Jersey, you're the only one, I'm the only one, I stand alone. I've no one to talk to, me, myself, and I. So yeah, I totally get you, Angela. It's hard when you're the only one. But we have each other. We have the organization, and I feel free to reach out. Anything that you're trying, I'd love to see. But I hope to see everybody at the conference. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Yeah, take it easy, Dahlia. She's going to sit down and look through it all day.
No. You don't have to read the whole thing at once. Joyce asked a question, and it's a very appropriate question, Joyce. Did the administrators get trained?
There is an implementation guide they just released for administrators, Joyce. That's a great question.
I saw that. I downloaded both.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't even know about it. I did do a presentation. Actually, it's actually 2 years ago now, Kathy. Can you believe it? 2 years ago, I presented to NJPSA. Kathy, remind them I'd love to come back. Kathy, I know is often at those meetings. So I think what's going to happen is administrators are going to hear that message this year, and they're going to want to do some training. So maybe towards the end or middle or end of this year, I can do a redo and an update of what I presented to NJPSA. Because there's a whole lot they need to know. I did provide for them a note-taking guide that during the presentation, if they completed it, it basically would be their district implementation plan of what they needed to do. So, and only a few folks were, it wasn't like a sellout show, but it was also brand new. So now that people are hearing about it, I'd like to offer to redo that again. But, again, I can't necessarily force that. I'm just there to, help make it happen. And I see Kathy's dropped in the chat the PD cert, the link to the PD cert. So please grab that. But you're absolutely right, Joyce. And remember, of course, we are always our strongest advocate. So again, feel free to share it forward and say, I went to a great PD yesterday and I learned about this. Can we start a PLC in our own district about this? Can we get time for training? Can we do this with administrators? Can I sit down and show you what I've learned, right? Having that time together and having a PLC in a PLC environment where everyone is an equal stakeholder is really what's going to be more equitable, truly. Like, we really want to approach it from that level, because these are standards for everyone. I'm telling
That's right.
you, because I am the one doing,
Yeah.
I don't know too many other folks who are actually working directly with a science teacher this year on these standards, and I'm doing it, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, these are engineering I'm not an engineer. Like, I would not teach this in my classroom, right? Like, no way. But I'm like, I'm struggling myself to see where it fits in. So I need them, they need me. And it's really key. I'm lucky I'm co-teaching these classes this year. But it's rough. We're trying to forge a way together. And we're just sort of making it happen. And I'm lucky that I can ask people at WIDA, is this right? Like, again, I don't know, right? There's no one for me to ask except, 2 folks that I know. And luckily they're there for me, but it's hard. It is hard. And, remember that we've got your back, but you're also your own strongest advocate. If we can bring that PLC model forward to district, because that's going to be the best way we can all learn from each other together, rather than trying to fight some battle. That's not
I
going to
think
work.
there's actually a mechanism in place. Remember the training of trainers with the NJDOE? My district, amongst others,
Right.
were actually part of this training, and perhaps
That
we
was
need a
for
refresh.
PSYOP, right? That was for
That was
PSYOP.
for
right?
PSYOP. And
Yeah.
I think that this is important to bring this piece in, because if we have that already and we have signed that memorandum, we should be using our trainers to train or turnkey it to our district.
It's a lot. It's gonna be a lot
It's a
because
lot, and
everyone
I-
needs it. Everyone needs
Mhm.
it. Yep.
It's enlightening the way that it's really refreshing. I do have to run to another committee meeting.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Nice
coming.
to see you, Joyce.
Nice seeing you. Bye.
And- Bye, Joyce.
So Rona
And-
has, is there a
yeah.
is there a document for districts to write to reinforce the WIDA training? So it's not so much a document, although, you know, teachers, again, it is in the bilingual code. So actually it is. In the
Right.
bilingual code, it does say, Rona, that your districts are responsible for making sure that their teachers are trained, ESL and bilingual teachers are trained in teaching their standards. These are your standards, but they're also everyone else's standards. This is standards for all. That's really where equity lies, right?
Well, I've only done things on my own, or our district has not.
Right, and
Yeah.
so they have title funds for that purpose, which
Okay.
means they can pay for you to come to our conference, which is
They,
why,
they will do that. Yes, they will
Yes.
do that.
right, which is why we always have WIDA there every year, right? Like
Okay.
I try to always do a WIDA present. I think I'm doing 2 this year. I just submitted them yesterday for Kathy.
Okay.
I know, they're there. You know, Dr. Schaefer Wilner's coming. She's the lead author of the standards. She's now on the assessment team. She'll be talking about both assessments and standards. But it is in the bilingual code. It's always been in the bilingual code. That's
Right.
not new. That's always been there.
I've
It's
gotten
just
a
that
letter.
how much do they know that these are everyone's standards? They're not getting that much.
That I'm not sure of. They
Right.
kind of, well, they're offering training, like basically sheltered instruction training, like the 15 hours out of Stockton.
So
So
here's what I
they'll
want to
do
say about
that.
that. I just feel the importance of saying, and I'm a trained trainer, so I can actually train on streets. However, sheltered instruction is a delivery model.
Right,
It's not your standards.
correct.
These are your standards.
Hmm.
You need to be trained in teaching your standards.
Right,
Sheltered instruction is for other teachers and in ways of teaching multilingual learners to help them deliver their content, but it's not their standards. These are
Mhm.
their standards as well. So it's a real difference because that's a method, but it's not the standards. Everyone still has to be trained in these standards. That's
No.
the big, this is my fear because I think districts, I'm hearing that more and more and districts, oh, but we have sheltered instruction. I'm like, that's not your standard.
right. Well, that's the
Nice,
cover. That's the
but it's, yeah, right. It's almost like equating it. Do you remember when we had to learn TPR?
yes.
Okay, it's a method, right? It's like that, when you had to learn how to teach that way, that's what it is. It's a method of instruction, but it's not your standards.
Mhm.
And that point deserves clarification. And unfortunately, we're the only ones saying it. We're the only ones saying it. Good luck getting anyone at NJDOE. That's okay,
Well, that's what really needs to happen.
right?
So.
We hear you. Oh, we know it. Don't we, Kathy? Yep. We know it. But, you know, again, at this point, what I can say is that you are your strongest advocate and, you know, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. We know that. And so that's why we modeled the PLC approach, which really is, let's sit down together. Let's get the stakeholders. Let's even find out who all the stakeholders are. But even if you start small, even with your own ESL teachers, and then bring in other folks, invite an administrator and say, this really is what it is. It really is for everyone. Start this year with a group that you can and start to build it out from there. But just to build your own capacity first, because again, within 2 years, we will be doing this. So this year, you're going to learn about it. The way it runs in our district is next year we write our curriculum. And then the 3rd year we implement it. So by then we'll be implementing it in the same year that the brand new access comes out. And the new access is going to be aligned to this.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
2026.
Yeah, they've already had us starting to write curriculum without the training.
Nope. Full stop on that. Put a full stop on it.
Oh, and I'm the only one who's done things on my own. No one else made the convention last year. No one's done any of the Saturdays.
Right,
No one did any of that.
right,
Okay.
right.
I
I'm
appreciate
with
your
you. I support you. reach
Thank you.
out, let me know if you know, I'm happy to give you people word. Sometimes people get asked for wording. How do I say?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Kathy, unmute.
Bring your administrator to the conference. Like that's how you.
Oh, well, you know what she does? She won't. She says, "Oh, I'll do the
Oh, you go.
virtual."
You go
Uh-huh.
to the virtual.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Well, then sit
I'll
with
keep.
her.
I'll keep.
Sit
I'll
with
keep
her and watch the virtual during a PD day. No,
Right.
for you know what? That's
That's a
how
good
I got
idea.
stuff done. Call
I
them
think
on what they
good idea.
say.
That's a great idea.
It's like, okay, that's great. Let's watch together so
Let's
that
take
we can plan how to roll this out.
Right. And that might even, you know, what I was saying to Kathy, I can represent this to NJPSA, but I actually did it yesterday in my own district, and I used the same note taker because again, we're all singletons where I'm up in North Jersey here in the corner. And so this is also really for the ESL teacher, because you're the one bringing it back to district to say, this is what we need. So I'm like, here it is on one page that articulates what all the things are that you need in a language that's palatable and acceptable and approachable for everyone, because this is truly what we all need. You just need to get that, you know, get your elevator pitch in. Here's that completed document that shows them everything. Can we have a meeting? Let's talk about this first. Let's form a PLC. This is bigger than all of us.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think
really,
one thing they said to me, I had like over 250 PD hours last year, and they're like, "That's not necessary.
I'm getting that too. I'm getting
They
that too.
don't want.
I know.
They don't.
I know.
They. You know, it's
Right,
the
'cause
mushroom.
who's your sub? A cardboard cutout of Elvis at this point, you know?
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, they
Mm.
cut me off after 20. Oh, you don't need to put any more down. You just
Yeah.
need your 20.
Right.
Um,
No.
Maggie or Kathy, I was thinking as we were talking here just now, the state, not the state, I'm sorry, WIDA through the state provided so many hours of training each year for sessions, and I always took advantage of them. Is there any word of that? Have we heard anything?
I tried to ask about that for years and I always
Mhm.
got pushed off.
Mhm.
They used to do them as like what they called units.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure that's happening anymore. At the WIDA end, they had it was almost like unit buying, and the state would select which ones they wanted to give us all access to. So it's kind of morphed a little bit from that. And now, as you see, if you subscribe to the WIDA mail,
Yeah.
now you're getting like direct solicitation. Hey, sign up for this workshop. Give us your $75, right?
Mhm.
Like, and I'm like, hell no. Like, I'm just call in, you know.
Well, there's
But they are, and some districts are purchasing that.
Yeah,
NGA has. I'm sorry, NGA has some through the counties too.
They might at this point. I don't know how they're running that.
Oh,
Um,
I'm running that.
Are you?
The blended learning.
Awesome.
Yeah. At least the
Wow.
southern one. So
Mm.
Okay. And that's through the county, Kathy?
it's actually through New Jersey, NJEA, but it's going to be broken up by North, Central, and South.
Mm.
If that's what you're talking about, Rona. I'm not
No,
sure.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just Gloucester County. I did one today just before I signed on with you guys. It was rapid learning, or graphic, reading and and all that. Everyone
Let's
there's
read
like
faster.
there's, there's different ones they have. There's like 7 or so, and they'll give you credit if you attend all 7. Like, well, they didn't say that up
Yes.
front. Luckily, I can, but that kind of stinks.
But
But
so this is going to roll out in the February, and it's actually not for you, it's for the mainstream teachers, but it doesn't specify the WIDA standards. It's more strategies.
Okay.
I know that we'd also gave some virtual trainings that I took part in,
Right.
and I really did not find those useful. They were too rushed, too
They
just
have a tendency to be kind of up here with the view. Like, again, it's that like 12,000 foot view.
Yeah.
And even like their implementation guide, and I get it because they have to address 38 different states and territories, so it's kind of hard to be like, and they're not classroom teachers, right? And that's why I always seek out that relationship with them, because I have things that I'm like, what about this? See, this is how I tried that. Like, and they're like, oh, wow, look at this. Okay. So it works, like it's a good blend. And I got some really great feedback when I presented a lot of our work that we did together as a PLC at WIDA, just specifically this year. So I was live to like, I don't know how many hundreds of people. I was like live on Zoom to like 500 people. They recorded the session and then I presented it live to 100 people the next morning. So I got a whole lot of feedback from folks, and they were just saying like, wow, this is the best thing I've seen, because I actually made people color and do the deconstruction chart. And I brought my own crayons. I got stopped at Newark Airport with my box of crayons. So like, what's in the box, lady? I'm like, they're just my crayons. We're just deconstructing, I swear. And folks were just so glad. They're like, wow, this is how you do it. And I'm like, hey, it's just one way. I don't know. Don't say that I have, you know what I mean? But they're like, yeah, but it's something, like, you can try it. And I'm not saying I have the answer, but like, it seems to work well. And it offers a solution that our kids need, because no one is teaching them how to make meaning while they're reading. They're just saying, okay, read and answer the questions. Okay, I don't get it. All right, just answer the questions. We're moving on.
Well,
Read
they don't
back.
have any comprehension. They don't comprehend, Maggie. These kids don't
know.
comprehend anything.
I know. So it is a lot. As I said, I totally understand the depths of it. I've had a lot of time with it. And I'm even learning, every time I look at it, I learn something again, or I rethink it. And I'm just grateful I still have that opportunity and still have that close relationship with, folks at WIDA. Because I've told WIDA, I said, you need to understand, because I keep telling them, here's what it's like in the field. This is going to be the next big thing for the next 20 years. I'm telling you. Because when I find out folks around the state, like, what's your ESL curriculum? And they're teaching Orton Gillingham. And I'm like, those aren't your standards.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about no equity. Those kids have no access to their standards. Not okay. Because when they take the access test, they've never seen any of that before. That's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have to build our capacity, right? We're the, first line of defense, but we also have to bring it forward. And it's hard that that's put upon us, because what's lacking right now is that accountability piece that we don't have. And I have to just be honest and say, I don't think we're going to have it. It lies with us here in this box, here in this bigger box of the Zoom, here in the bigger box of the organization, and know that we stand with you. But I've been told directly, literally from my folks at WIDA that I know, they're like, you keep doing what you're doing in NJTESOL-NJBE, because we are one voice together, and we're better together. We know that. And, we give each other that strength and kind of continue. And for me, it's such a valuable asset, because like I said, I've always sought out the organization, because I'm by myself, just me here, nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
I just try stuff, and it's people seem to kind of take to it. The kids seem to do well with it. I have great examples, and that's all I'm bringing forward. So I would just love to see how other folks are just trying it. Just try it. Let me know how it goes. Try deconstructing something like this year. Try a unit sketch just on information. It's the easiest thing to implement. And pick something you already do. Like if you do animal reports, or if you any kind of report, a country report, an animal report, any kind of report, that's informational text. If you already do that, sketch out a unit just on that. And that's a way to start small, so it doesn't feel like this big gigantic thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, ladies. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to end the recording now. So.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for